Okay, can we agree on something? Critics can be mean. Besides that, I like to think I'm a pretty generous critic. I can see the good in a lot of bad games, and I'm not afraid to call out games when they have glaring issues. So this situation just kind of confuses me more. What the hell happened to Medieval Scores? I honestly have no explanation.
If you saw my last video, you'll know that I really enjoyed the demo they put up on the PlayStation Store. Now that I got my hands on the game, I can confidently say that this is really damn good. This is one of the most faithful remakes I've ever played. Just about everything in the game is almost exactly the same, and the new additions to the gameplay really help make it that much better. Sir Dan moves better, having 2 slots for weapons really helps you quickly handle certain situations. The Dan cam is cool, but could really be improved, and the visuals are gorgeous. I only have a few small problems. First off, I do wish the map told you if you've already collected the chalice without having to go back in, check, and then leave. I also wish there was an objective list or something that helps you guide you on where to go next if you come back to play the next day or something. But other than that, the game is extremely good.
So, what's up with the critic scores? As of right now, Medieval stands at a 67 on Metacritic, and that's pretty bad. A lot lower than I was expecting. But as we all know, this score doesn't really matter that much. This score is what matters to us. This shows you how people actually feel about the game, as 8.3 out of 10 is really good. User reviews tell you how the customer feels about the game currently. So if this score doesn't really matter to us, then who does it matter to? Sony. Sony funded, marketed, barely, and published the game, so the critic scores matter more to them. They need to see if this project was a good investment and if there's potential for the IP to move forward. I mean, why do you think we don't have Knack 3?
67 is so jarring to me. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what went wrong for them. Critics usually love remakes. To pinpoint this problem, let's take a look at some recent remakes this generation and see what was different. We'll start with the big one, Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 is a remake slash reimagining. It's a remake in the sense that it's the same story, same setting, same characters, and it's a reimagining in the sense that the gameplay is basically a completely different genre. And that was kind of needed. The team took an old, cherished game and brought it to modern day with new controls that complemented the whole game even more. It currently is sitting at a 91 on Metacritic with a must-play badge attached to it. That's extremely good, especially for a remake. A little more recent of an example would be Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. It's just Gen 1 with a lot of new and modern features. No wild battles, new ways to customize your Pokemon, new way to catch and level up Pokemon, interaction with a modern smartphone app. Critics loved it and it sits at an 80. User reviews, not as generous, but still, critical response means more to the publisher, so this one succeeded. I think the most recent example would be CTR Nitro Fueled. CTR sits at a score of 83 with the user score being 6.5. The game is a remake of the original CTR game from the PS1 with tighter controls, which critics loved. They also love the fact that this is more than a remake with how much content's being pumped into it. Grand Prix, new characters, new tracks. It's all mainly online focused, which kind of explains the user score. It's a very modern remake of a classic game.
Now those examples were remakes that changed a lot about the original game. What about remakes that basically kept the game the same? Medieval kept almost everything the same and scored poorly. Did the others score poorly? No. In fact, they scored better.
I guess we can thank Crash for starting this big modern wave of remakes. Crash Insane was a huge surprise to us and to Activision. Knowing Activision, they don't really have any interest in remaking anything. It's all about COD and the plummeting demise of Skylanders at the time. From what we know, I think we can thank Sony for pushing Activision. Regardless, we have the Insane Trilogy, and it's scored very well. Sitting at an 80 on Metacritic, Crash took the world by storm. Again, all of the level geometry mechanics were kept intact. The only thing that was changed was the controls. Crash felt more responsive, which is a given when remaking a game from that long ago. Coming in hot after that is Spyro. Spyro Reignited was basically the same as Crash, just on a slightly bigger scale. Spyro currently sits on a higher score than Crash with an 82. Again, keeping the game the same more or less with slight changes here and there. Gameplay wise, it's basically the same. Another remake in this category is Ratchet & Clank. Basically a remake slash reboot of the first game, just faster paced and better put together. Same levels and story, kind of. Writing is different here and there, but you visit the same locations and everything. Now I think this next one falls closer to Medieval in terms of a remake, but somehow scored way higher. Before I get into it, let's take a look at what critics said about Medieval. Going through all the reviews on the site, it seems almost every mixed review said that the gameplay was outdated, unresponsive, janky, and not suited for modern gameplay, which hurts my head the more I read it. Medieval is an RPG at heart. There's platforming here and there with close quarters combat. You're given an arsenal of weapons as you progress through the game that all have their own quirks. You can really think first about how you're going to handle an upcoming dilemma. Sir Dan controls very nicely in the remake. In the original, yes, he moves a little too quick and doesn't slow down fast enough. It's all fixed in the remake, so I feel like I have a better handle of him. These critics don't really get into what they mean by outdated gameplay. Games have been doing this stuff for years. It's pretty basic, honestly. So let's see. Medieval keeps the gameplay the exact same and even improves it, then scores low. What happens when another game does the same exact thing? I don't get it. The remake for Shadow of the Colossus did the exact same thing as Medieval and somehow scored a 91. The same score as RE2 and even has a must-play badge on it as well. Before I continue, let me make something extremely clear. Shadow of the Colossus is not a bad game, by any means. What I'm getting at is critics ripped into Medieval for saying the controls were janky, outdated, and not modern enough. Shadow of the Colossus keeps the gameplay in check perfectly, just like Medieval. For me, personally, I feel like I control Sir Dan better than I do Wander. With Wander, I feel like he's constantly flopping around on the big boys trying to get a hold. Every time he jumps, he feels loose. It's something you have to get used to, not to mention the environments are giant. Like, it's gonna take a while for you to get from point A to point B. What I'm saying is, I think Medieval controls better than Shadow of the Colossus, while also having more to do. Now don't get me wrong, both games are very different in their own right, but both games did the exact same thing, keeping the original gameplay intact and giving it a fresh coat of paint. One scored phenomenally with no negative reviews, and the other scored poorly with mainly mixed reviews. It's funny because if you look at the user reviews for Shadow on PS4, a lot of people point out that the controls are really hard to get used to for newcomers, which is the same problem critics had with Medieval. I think what I'm getting at is never make Metacritic the sole reason you buy a game or not. Medieval PS4 is a great game that I think you should all really try. Like I said, critical scores matter more to the publisher than user reviews. But you know what matters more to publishers than critical score? Sales. A game can sell really well and still get bad reviews from critics. If people buy it, then that's what matters more to them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.